Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Hey, doing well, doing well. How are you?
Good.
I think we're gonna have to pick up the energy after that intro.
Yeah.
The beat was going. I was not
Man.
ready for that.
Should have me like kind of running to my desk and get ready like I'm getting on stage to that music.
Yeah.
Honestly.
We could do that next time.
Yeah.
Cool. You guys ready to get into it?
Yeah, it's exciting. Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for spending a little time with us today. Excited for the conversation on how HubSpot and Twilio Segment work together to help teams use their data and turn that data into revenue. Quick note, we've reserved some time for Q&A and we'll address as many questions as we can during that time. So go ahead and drop those in the chat so we can get to those at the tail end here. From an agenda, quick look at where we're headed today. We're going to start with the problem, what we're seeing in the market and exactly why we're having this conversation. Do some clarification around Segment, HubSpot, where each of those fit, and then get into how they're working together and walk you through some practical use cases and real world examples from what we've seen. So we're also going to close with common pitfalls and what you should avoid when you're deploying these, and then get into the QA. Before we dive in, quick introductions here and introduce the team. I'm Steven, Senior Partnerships Manager at Aptitude 8. I'll be the moderator and kind of helping the conversation, connect the dots as we go. And I'm joined by two people who spend their time more directly in the work that we're talking to today. So Safdar, I'll kick it over to you for a brief intro and tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. My name is Safdar. I'm a partner solutions engineer at Twilio. I've been at Twilio for over 4 years now. I've worked with the CDP side of the business and most recently with the communication side of the business as well. I work across our entire partnership ecosystem, including systems integrators, tech partners, hoping to really integrate the technologies, unlock use cases, and ensure we are driving success with our customers' use cases. And Reed, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Reed Iandolo. I am the VP of Technology at Aptitude 8. I've been at the company for going on 6 years now. And in my role, kind of just oversee and make sure from a technical perspective on our implementations of HubSpot and all of our other systems, Twilio Segment as one of them, make sure we're delivering proper solutions to our clients, working on some of our more technical projects for sure, and just making sure, obviously, all the work we're doing makes sense and working with all of our partners and systems involved to satisfy and meet our clients' needs.
Awesome. All right. So before we dive into specifics about HubSpot and Segment, let's talk about or address kind of the challenge. What's driving this conversation? So would love to hear from you both perspectives, what you see, what's driving the challenge and managing data in companies today.
Yeah, so I think we've got more customer data really than ever. Like there is a lot of possibility for data to just exist basically from different systems, different platforms, and it's can be a struggle to actually turn that data into action. And what we see is there's actually a lot of mistrust in data, and getting to clean and connected and trustworthy data is super important to have to be able to action on that data. And really, more is not really the problem. It's usually strategy, governance, and how to action the data effectively. And I know with AI, this is a really common thing as well, which I know Safdar, you guys are working heavily, and so curious to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. Every team that we have spoken to, they have more and more behavioral data. So definitely the problem isn't volume. It's there's couple of issues, right? The data lives in multiple systems. Each of those systems has their own version and view of the user. None of them kind of agree with each other. Sales sees one thing, marketing sees another, product sees. It's an age-old problem, right? And and every one of those teams now has this AI mandate. Like, we want AI, so they try to put an AI layer on top of this data. They want to do predictive scoring. They want to power agentic workflows, generative personalization content, all these things that on top of this data. But as we all know, AI just amplifies whatever you feed it. So if the input is too large, if it's disconnected, if the data contradicts each other itself, then the output quality of the AI suffers. So we're seeing the teams that are really winning with AI right now are the ones that are kind of focusing and fixing that data layer first. It just accelerates their adoption and effectiveness of their AI projects.
Percent. And that's why we're here. And I think sets us up for our next, the natural next question. If that's the problem, how do these platforms fit in? How do they solve for that or help companies solve for that? So love to dive into a little bit about how the platforms work themselves, and then we'll get into how they work together to solve for a lot of those problems. So again, I'll kick it over to you, Safdar, to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just keep this brief, just a quick framing. We'll kind of dive deeper into the platform as we get through the talk, I think. Segment is the data layer, right? And it really does four main things. The first thing is connections, which is effectively collecting and distributing behavioral data from websites, mobile apps, backend servers, third-party applications, essentially anywhere that it exists, and it routes it wherever it needs to go in the tech stack, including HubSpot, obviously. And in the middle of that, we have a lot of value adding things that happen to the data, like data governance with protocols. It validates, it standardizes the events to the corporate standards so that when it leaves the stack and it arrives into the destination's tools, it's clean and it's consistent. And so most teams kind of skip this step and then they regret it because they're have to focus a lot of time on that cleanup effort. So when that data lands in their warehouse and their ad platforms, and it just elongates the time to value for a lot of their projects. And then also in the middle of that is identity resolution. And so more than ever now, right, especially when we talk about agentic workflows and AI agents, we need to be able to give the human and AI in that scenario an understanding of who this customer is, right? And so that involves a lot of kind of anonymous behavior that's happening and stitching that anonymous behavior to any existing or known profiles that we have of that person across device, across channel now. So there's a lot of channel switching. Everybody starts with chat. Maybe they go to voice. They go to the web browser. So it's combining those identities into a single view of that customer. It could be in the warehouse as well. And then activating, right? So that last kind of pillar with Segment is activation. So this is all about building audiences in real time and pushing them into the downstream tools where that activation occurs, that engagement occurs with the end user. So, just a high level, summary of the four main pillars here of Segment. And so from here, maybe Reed, you can get into the HubSpot side of things.
Yeah. So kind of that last pillar, the engagement or the activation layer, that's really where HubSpot plays a critical part. Obviously, this is where your sales, your marketing, your service, your CS team might be working out of. Actually, their day to day. This is where they're doing all of their work, and this is where HubSpot can then take all of that data that Segment has set up for us, and obviously having the strategy of what we're actually integrating, getting all the data in that you need to then be able to build workflows, send emails, alert sales reps on certain items, or alert CS reps in certain scenarios. So HubSpot becomes that activation layer from that cleaned up governed data that comes out of Twilio Segment. And what we see a lot as well is HubSpot can solve and be kind of that CDP P layer at a smaller scale, but it becomes as the amount of data as the company grows, HubSpot becomes less capable to do a lot of the stuff that Twilio has. As you get more product data, as you get just more systems involved, moving that work up the stack into Segment, for instance, is a really good use case, and where we see a lot of the value of being able to get only the data we really need to action into HubSpot to be able to move forward on. So again, HubSpot being where you physically act on the data, and then Segment being the part that really makes us choose and decide what data is actually worth acting on and getting into the system.
Awesome.
And from here becomes kind of the two layers, right? So we've talked about the data layer, which is Segment, collecting, standardizing, governing the quality. So all the pieces that Safdar mentioned previously, and then HubSpot being that activation layer. So scoring the leads, triggering workflows, sending emails, all the personalization that comes into play. And what we see from that, obviously, is both of those working together helps drive revenue, maintain revenue, get us faster conversions, better pipeline, better data, all the stuff that moves the needle when it comes to actually generating more revenue for the business. I think
I think those. Go ahead.
You go ahead, Steven.
I was going to say, I think those combined on the front end is what gives us, I hear a lot of single pane of glass, 360 view. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into next, is exactly how it does that and what that looks like.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I'll be brief on this. It's kind of a visual representation of those 4 pillars that I talked about earlier. But really, what this summarizes is how this kind of 360 view gets created. So you'll see a profile here, Avery Thompson, right? And throughout the life cycle of Avery, we have been able to collect all the events, the behaviors that Avery has performed, calculate computations on top of their profile, because we are able to track here, as you can see on the left-hand side, all the actions that Avery has done, all the transactions, all the clicks, every single conversation that they've had with the brand. So this goes through the pipeline of Segment, ensures that it's compliant on consent, ensures that any like PII is stripped out if we need to. And then, calling out specifically the data warehouse, we can do this in a composable architecture. So if the data warehouse is kind of the center, the core of that customer 360, where a lot of the data already exists, so Segment has that interoperability to work in this composable manner off of the warehouse. But ultimately, you end up with this 360 view, all the audiences that they are a part of, all the traits and all the identities, right? So that whenever then we need to deliver this 360 view across the entire tech stack, whether that is paid channels, CRM analytics, attribution, every single one of those tools has a consistent understanding of Avery. And so that really leads to a cohesive experience across every single team, right? Because those different teams are using these different tools. And then, I want to call out like the AI element of this. We have so many agentic workflows across these tools. Well, even more important now is to ensure that the contextual layer, the contextual data layer that a lot of these agents are referencing when they're choosing what to do, how to engage, or what tool calls to make, all these things matter, because the data matters for all these things, because again, the context is so much more important. So I think like just to summarize here, that 360 view is something that it gets delivered to all these tools and wherever it needs to. And so, if we kind of go to the next slide here, it will kind of showcase like, okay, well, how does that delivery mechanism happen specifically for HubSpot? So this is a very high level summary of what that integration looks like. And just 2 things to anchor on, and it's super important because again, regardless if we're talking about like drip campaigns or if we're talking about like agentic workflows, right? There's a certain level of bidirectionality, and then real time. That's super important for these. And so these integrations are those two things. They're bidirectional and they're real time. So the first kind of integration type is HubSpot as a source. And so in this one, Segment can pull records and properties out of HubSpot automatically. So contacts, companies, deals, lifecycle stages, you name it, right? So most teams treat HubSpot as their system of record for that customer. But then they end up rebuilding that same view in their warehouse, maybe in their BI tool, their support platform, and have distinct pipelines for those. But with this connection in place, HubSpot data can flow downstream wherever it needs to go via Segment. So kind of this consolidated, this pipeline. And the next one is HubSpot as a destination. So it's kind of the core one here, right? Where Segment is going to be writing the contacts, the companies, custom objects in HubSpot in real time. And that custom object piece matters a lot. I think like, if you've modeled subscriptions and accounts and I don't know, vehicles if you're a dealership, you have custom properties, custom objects in HubSpot, it can get pretty complex. And so keeping those up to date, Segment adds a lot of value, because in the same way that it can keep a contact updated, it can keep those objects updated. And it's real time. So a moment a user signs up, there's an account created, they start using a feature, they pass a certain threshold, that record is updated. And then the last thing here is audiences. And so again, like one of the capabilities of Segment is calculating these traits that live on the customer profile. So just a couple examples are like how much they've spent, they're like their lifetime value, their adoption scores, last time since they logged in. If they're frustrated like with the product, they have a lot of support tickets open, right? So these audiences can then, these computations are calculated and they can then be sent to HubSpot. In addition to that, we have audiences that can leverage those traits, right? To say, okay, give me everybody that's had a very frustrating experience in the past week. Or somebody that's completed a trial and they haven't onboarded yet, or they're stuck somewhere in the onboarding process. So we have these kind of ways to create these cohorts. And so both of these can then sync to HubSpot as properties, as list memberships, and they update in the moment, right? So whenever the data changes. And so HubSpot is in a way it's receiving those upstream signals of all this data orchestration that's happening. So whenever you're running a campaign, and you need that logic that or data or logic that lives in your warehouse, it lives in your product, in your ML models, right? Or if there's an agent that's like saying something that needs to happen, and you need to orchestrate that, HubSpot can receive those signals, and those same signals are the signals that the rest of the stack is going to receive. So, yeah, I think getting all of this is great. There's so many different connection points, but I think what's good to get is get like a good picture on like, okay, well, what does it kind of look like, right? How does this 360 view, what does it look like in HubSpot? And I think the next one is a view into that, and I'll let Reed kind of explain this one.
Yeah, so really tying into the pieces that Safdar called out of, there's all this data that exists out there that Segment's picking up, and we are now governing, deciding what goes into HubSpot, what makes sense to actually see inside of HubSpot. So this is giving us a bit of a view into the HubSpot UI for a contact record for Avery here. So we can see all of the traditional kind of CRM data that you would expect. You can see their associated company on the right side. We can see we're working a deal on the right side as well. But then we also can see some of that activated data that we're talking about. So in the middle here, for instance, we have a report that's showing login activity for this person's account. So we can see over the past couple of weeks, there's been consistent logins per day, basically for this account. And that's a data point that's coming through from the Segment integration that we can now report on, and sales and CS can see that, all right, they are for sure using the product, they're logging in, they are a good candidate maybe for expanding, or good candidate for renewal, obviously, and even build workflows, customizations, automations off of this data as well. And we see in kind of the bottom left as well, we have a little bit more like product data. So their last activity date in the product, their general status, some of their thresholds they've hit for what we decide as someone onboarding into the product maybe has different steps to become fully activated, and we've seen they've hit a certain threshold. So this really shows that um, choosing the right subset of data, defining that at the CDP level, and then pushing that data into HubSpot that we can action on is super impactful. And also doing this helps us reduce the noise, right? Like we don't need to see all of that data from Segment that we're pulling from all of these sources in our CRM. It's just going to create a bunch of noise for our people that are actually using the system, and getting a actionable set of data for people that is refined and actually useful and not just bloat is super important to make use of HubSpot in its best possibilities.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So I think, like, just to summarize this and walk through the 6 steps here. So again, first step, collection, right? Segment's going to be collecting those behaviors across web, mobile, product, data warehouse. It's unifying that data into these resolved profiles, building this kind of single customer profile that's available across the entire stack. And then it's sending that structured data from Segment into HubSpot, where then HubSpot, the contacts and the companies are then updated in real time. And so the beauty of it is that, as Reed mentioned, right, you can then do things like kick off workflows, sequences, alerts based off of these actual behaviors and these intent signals, these revenue triggering signals that would otherwise come from various different tools. It would require work if you wanted to stitch all that together in a different kind of tool. But with Segment, it kind of gives you that upstream ability to then within HubSpot do that activation. So now every team is between sales, marketing, customer support. They're working from that complete picture. So ultimately, like, the implementation time across all these things, that I think the key here is that once you get that data layer set up first, it makes any additive work, any kind of adopting additional use cases, adding new technologies, expanding your use of HubSpot so much more easier, right? Because now, like as Reed mentioned, you're very surgical with like the data that you need. And so when you need to then adopt a new functionality, a new use case, you know exactly what I need to add. And guess what? You're already collecting it, right? And so it's just a matter of adding a new mapping within the destination configuration, or adjusting the way that you're collecting the data, which with a lot of our new tooling that makes it much easier to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Safdar, around future technical debt in your destination systems as well. Of if you don't have a good definition of what you're pushing into a HubSpot, for instance, and you're pushing more data than you need, you're just moving the work now into HubSpot. Of now we have to decide, we have to build more workflows or reports or more segmentation to get to the actual usable set of data for HubSpot. And if you do that pre-work up front and you have that clearly defined set of data that you're pushing out to your systems, it really reduces the technical debt across all of those destinations over time. So I think that's a really important point to keep in mind, of doing the strategy and figuring out the work on the CDP side first can really help drive the direction and strategy for all of your destination systems as well.
Awesome. Really good overview. Really appreciate it. And I think it makes it really clear, right? So kind of another broad overview. When you put these systems together, Segment is handling that, complete data layer. collection, governance, identity pieces, building the audience, pushing it over to HubSpot, which is then handling all of the activation for your workflows, outreach, routing, and reporting. So each of these platforms playing a big role to provide clean, reliable data, actionable data, and then actually taking action on that and making it so your teams can do that. Let's get into a couple use cases and just see exactly what this looks like. We picked 4 today, so we'll start with account-based buying signals and then get into a couple others. Let's jump into this one. I'm going to hand it off to Sapna.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this scenario is interesting because this is one that I think the challenge has evolved a lot over the years, and primarily it has to do with this concept of like accounts, right? You have accounts, you have these groupings that represent a higher level entity that's detached from you, that is attached to your users, but it's sometimes difficult to roll up, right? So like imagine like if you have an account with 10 users and 3 are logging in daily, 2 are using they're trialing out some premium features. One of them is like sharing and inviting their teammates. So, on their own, you get like kind of mixed signals. Maybe somebody is actually frustrated and dealing with issues. But what does that look like at an aggregated level, at an account level, right? And so sometimes that can lead to you getting some buying signals. Like if all these people collectively are doing things that can determine that, oh, this might be an interesting account to try to target for an upsell, right? And the problem is that the most sales teams can't see that, right? Because that activity is scattered across the different tools within the product itself, sometimes in the warehouse. But because Segment is capturing that user level intent, so wherever that account level definition lives, if that's in your warehouse, right? If you're doing that account level grouping in your warehouse, if it's in Segment itself, we're able to roll these signals up to that account level. And especially because Twilio, we recently released entity-based audiences. And so just to very quickly explain what that is, like traditionally you could always build audiences based off of profiles, right? So grouping or triggering changes in these cohorts of people based off of behavior that people did, right? But now you can build audiences directly against, I want to say, business entities, right? So like accounts, right? Accounts, subscriptions, opportunities, not just user profiles. So, and an example logic for that could be if 3 or more users from, let's say, an account, an enterprise account read the documentation, API documentation in the last 14 days, and the account value is greater than 100K, right? So we're able to combine signals between user and account. And then ultimately Segment is then able to materialize that audience and natively and then push it and combine it from the warehouse from different places and push it into HubSpot. So it kind of, we corral this concept of user attaching that to an account level. And then even for like outside of just the account level, when we think about, different concepts within a business, right? Different business entities, the subscription statuses, the opportunities within the CRM itself, within HubSpot, or usage metrics that are in the warehouse that's important, right? These are all things that can define and create these buying signals. We can deliver that into HubSpot. Maybe Reid, like you can kind of talk to us like how that, what that would mean in from the HubSpot sense of what you could do with some of that.
Yeah, so I think continuing on of getting that usage spike or multiple users interacting with a page or some piece of the product. Obviously, we want to get that into HubSpot, and that's just the first part of it, right? And then we need to actually act on that data, and that's the key part. I think if you ask any sales rep, they don't love bouncing around looking for things in the CRM. They like getting things sent to them, right? So being able to get those notifications that are buying signals to the right people at the right time is also super important to make sure it's not just another report or list view that you're checking in every once a week or something like that. So that's where I think Steve, if we go to the next slide here, we can show kind of like a workflow, right? You could you could have this information come in as a custom event potentially, or a property on a company record, and physically trigger a workflow and look at who owns that company. And maybe we make a task for the AE or for the CSM to actually go out and say, all right, they have completed these items that we deem as high buying signal activity. This is what they've actually did. This is when they did it. We recommend reaching out and building a task for them to actually go off and action on that. And that also could mean sending off additional marketing emails or some other nurturing campaign as well, depending on the use case. So obviously it's super important to get the data in, but then actioning it and getting it in front of the right people's eyes at the right time is really what makes it super impactful and get you more towards driving that revenue.
Yeah, I think it's super powerful, and like, even, as you all are looking at agentic use cases, even leveraging Breeze agents within HubSpot, like at the end of the day, like it still needs the data, right? If we have these this agent that's prospecting, it's a prospecting agent that you have in HubSpot. It has to monitor accounts for those buying signals. So the source is going to be those contacts, and it's going to be that core data. So when we think about like what agents are going to be doing, right, they're in a way they're replicating the same kind of logic that maybe the workflows are doing, or like an AE is doing. So it's even more important because it doesn't have that, at least, it's going to get better, but it doesn't have that nuanced understanding to kind of read through bad data to then say, okay, you know what, nah, that's not right. So it's even more important to get the right and buying signals and comprehensive buying signals to whatever like agents you're deploying within HubSpot. So if we look at, I think, like the next use case here, product qualified leads and upsell signals, I think, product behavior, what's interesting is, it's the most powerful signal, right? In my opinion, it's like, it's actually what people are doing in the product, not just like whether they're happy. Like this is the direct like measurement of how they're using the product. And so, and a lot of the reasons why teams don't act on the signal is because it can live in the product. It can maybe stay in the warehouse and it's siloed in the warehouse, and data engineers struggle to give business teams access to that. They may push all this data into the CRM, but then, where does that interoperability exist with the rest of the stack? So you end up with product teams that, they have an understanding of these high intent users, but sales teams don't have a way of seeing that. So the flow, like we talked about, to be pretty straightforward when Segment's in place. If a trial starts, Segment is capturing that as an event that they signed up. If they hit like a key feature, it's capturing that. And instead of, for instance, defining rigid thresholds, like, okay, they logged in 5 times. What does that even mean? Does that say anything? Like, does that actually measure the fact that they are satisfied or they're having a good experience? It just says that they logged in 5 times, right? And so this is where some of the more advanced capabilities like Segment's customer AI, which calculates purchase propensity scoring. And what it's going to do is, it's not just looking at only this fact that they logged in 5 times, but it's looking at everything else that would be involved in determining if they have a high propensity to make a purchase. Could be the logged in, it could be their usage, it could be how many kind of iterations of the product they're using, how many different features they're using, how long they're using it, right? All these signals, the inherent tool, because it's all the event data. And I'm saying customer AI as in the native AI predictions capability in Segment, because we have some of these models out of the box. However, if a business is doing a lot of this modeling within their warehouse or any other tool, again, the net of it is that core event behavioral data, which is powering our models, is going to be available in the warehouse for those custom models to run off of. So it doesn't matter where you're doing that prediction. The key is that you need that data that we have in order to do that prediction, where we make it available where that happens. Anyway, the point is, ultimately, wherever it's happening, if it gets synced back into HubSpot, like, then you have a signal where if it's above 85%, then Segment will fire that into HubSpot, and HubSpot will have that signal, and then Reed, maybe you can talk about like, what can we do now, right? When we have such a powerful signal that encompasses everything that user did, that can lead to this kind of product qualified upsell signal.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, depending on what your kind of revenue motion looks like, will drive your strategy on this. But physically getting in that a customer is a potential upsell, being able to flag that to the CSM, the AE involved, to take action on that now, basically, right? And that's the power of the real-time sync as well. Of this could be pretty close to instant of they hit these propensity scores, or they hit these usage metrics, and it's almost seconds or minutes before an AE or a CSM gets alerted to some of this action, which we know for sure in the revenue game, seconds and minutes count, and when you can get to the person at the right time, it's really important. So I think that's another huge piece of this is the real-time nature. But once we get that data in, then again, we can route to the right people, we can create workflows, trigger things off of that, build reports, and again, just really make sure we are servicing the data to the right people inside of the CRM, inside of HubSpot, so that they are getting alerted to it and can take action on it, and not being passive in how we go about doing that. And again, the ability of custom events or custom property syncing or custom object syncing to allow the triggering is really what drives us and allows us to make those real-time notifications and whatever it might be from a revenue side. I think on the customer health side, so I think this is another big one. Obviously, we've gone through kind of buying signals, people going through a trial, maybe onboarding into the platform, but now you have a customer who's already bought your product, and now we're actually wanting to see how they're using the product. We're coming up on some sort of renewal, potentially ongoing monitoring, and again, from the segment side of collecting all of that information from the product to be able to see those usage metrics, the login, what pages they're visiting, see who our power users are, see who the people are who are not actually using the product are, and being able to collect all that information. And again, same thing from a revenue perspective when we talk about strategy and governance of what are like buying signals and what are the things that the sales teams care about. Same applies to the CS team, service department, of defining those metrics of what is a usage drop, when should we be alerted. And I think Safdar, maybe if you can tie in a little bit of some of the segment side things that where you can collect that information and what some maybe scoring models or what you see customers do in those use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's quite a lot, because once you have that raw data, you can create a lot of computation on top of that. Login frequency, features going abandoned come to mind, support tickets spiking. And an interesting one that I'll mention is that, as part of the entire Twilio stack, right? Like a key kind of signal is the voice. Is a voice layer, right? Voice engagements or web chat engagements or SMS engagements. And so, the trend now is voice and especially agentic voice. And so being able to capture those signals to understand sentiment when I'm talking to an AI agent or a human agent, and I'm showing through my language, through my tone, frustration, or or if I'm happy, right? Or if I'm stuck on something. All of these insights, right? And I'm glossing over capabilities that the Twilio platform and segment have as a whole, but these are things that we can power, is where we can extract those sentiments and those signals and be able to stamp that onto the profile of the customer to then deliver to HubSpot. So, a use case where I'm chatting with an agent, or like a chatbot agent on the website for a customer, and as a customer, and my tone and my language, I'm frustrated, and these are clear signals of customer health. And so it's just kind of taking this unstructured data and defining some structure around it and getting some insights out of that. Could be used to then within HubSpot. So like as Reed mentioned, for kind of empowering the CS teams. So beyond just that, like there's a whole predictive layer. We have an out of the box predictive model for likelihood to churn. So workflows in HubSpot can then do suppressing promotional emails and stop annoying people if they're already frustrated. Like, that's happened to me. Like I'm calling in, I'm not happy with AT&T. They, somebody literally cut I had my sprinkler system installed, and the guy just literally cut through the fiber cable. So I'm on the phone with AT&T, and it's like frustrating to try to get them to explain what happened. Like, well, what's your speed? Did you do a speed test? I'm like, no, I'm telling you that somebody cut my cable. I see the cut cable. So there's this understanding of context here that, and so the customer health there suffered. I'm like, you guys aren't getting it. And so, but lo and behold, the next day, or I think it was the same day, I got like this promotional email, like, hey, do you want to upgrade? I'm like, I just had this terrible customer experience with you all. Like, you really want me? You're really trying to upsell me right now? You should be giving me a discount, right? And so like the signal to give me a $5 off this month discount, it was something that was missing, right, for them. And so they weren't able to capture all these behavior patterns that I had across voice, across the website, across the app. I'm like chatting in the app. So that's just a real world scenario that I literally went through last week. But that should have flagged something in their CRM, and to then be able to kind of engage me in a comprehensive manner across advertising, across email, across like live agent support. And so that's kind of the experience that we want to drive when we think about customer health, right? This kind of comprehensive thing that understands usage, understands support spikes, understands like feature abandonment, things like that. Like kind of builds that full picture.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. Around this is it's complex as your number of users grow, your product grows. If you have an account with 1,000 users, there very well could be 5 people that are extremely happy, and there could be 5 people that are dealing with support. And
right.
Having the strategy of like, how should we actually action that account, or what is the customer's health in those scenarios, to be able to effectively work with that account as a whole, but also those individual people, is both obviously strong suit of Twilio Segment, but then also in the HubSpot side, we can have account company level workflows and things that happen, but also individual contact level information. So when we're syncing our usage metrics and things like that, we can sync at both of those levels, which is also really nice. We can see overall company, but we can also see individual people and individual users, and being able to kind of connect those dots easily on both sides is also really important to have in both these platforms, obviously.
Yeah.
Awesome. Safdar, love the example. It was very relatable example from a customer health perspective. I feel like we've all been through that. I think I've been through a couple of those last week as well. We also have a example, more broadly speaking, of a customer here that we want to walk through. And this is a customer that was, is now using HubSpot and Segment. And we'll just walk through, I guess, what that challenge was and what the outcomes ended up to be for them. So I will kick this one over to Reed.
Yeah, so Rector Seal's one of our clients and also one of Twilio Segment's clients who around the end of last year, and we're still working with them today. We worked on implementing both Segment and HubSpot for them. And Raptor Seal is like a manufacturing company. I believe they're like in chemical sealants, I believe it is. And manufacturing companies are a very high volume of data industry. So they for sure are through the old adage of disconnected data across all these platforms. So their main use case or issue really was between disconnection between HubSpot, their various ad platforms, and Snowflake, which was their data warehouse. And they were, because of how they sell things, they can sell to multiple different profiles. They were unable to distinguish essentially their different profiles to be able to make better outreach through their ad campaigns and through emails based on those profiles. So they had a very manual resolution process that they were doing that required them kind of looking at all of these different platforms separately, and they weren't really combined. Certain things were in one platform, certain things were in another platform, and they really had that no unified view of what things look like. So if we go to the next one here, what we ended up doing is Segment came into play, and that is where we got the unified visibility and attribution across all those channels. So we connected all the ad platforms, we connected Snowflake, we connected HubSpot, so that we could get to those profiles, build out the traits, all the things that Safdar's talked about previously. And I think another big piece here is the Snowflake side is they did go more of that composable route. So Snowflake stayed as their real like data warehouse layer, and Segment was on top of that. So leveraging the Snowflake data in conjunction with these other ad platforms and some other systems, we built out that profile and helped consolidate a bunch of stuff down. So the other part here is we obviously used HubSpot as our main destination in this. So we were able to build out some pretty neat HubSpot side things for routing of leads and contacts and companies to the right people based on zip codes. So we used some of the more technical components of HubSpot within Ops Hub or Data Hub. We use custom events as well. So we were able to push out events from Segment through those ad platforms to push into HubSpot to know what's working well, who to target more. And then from a routing and governance perspective, we were able to like standardize down a bunch of our properties in our CRM and get to a more consistent kind of understanding of what our entities are inside of HubSpot. And that helped from a governance perspective and also helped from a routing perspective. So just a really good under our use case for having these separate data sources where we have a little bit of connection, but not as much as we like. Putting Segment on top of it really solved the use case of being able to bring all of that data together and get the insights and the reporting that we were looking for, help them define those profiles and be able to target people much better. And then with all of that upfront work, we were then able to go to the HubSpot side and build out all of the customizations there and really action and activate that data, which we've talked about in our prior pieces as well. I think.
We may have lost
still here?
him. Oh, there you are.
The camera cut out.
Your camera cut out.
Oh.
We can hear your voice. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, my screen also cut out, so I will
Okay.
I will, hopefully
Oh,
this is
there
the
you go.
next slide.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
the next slide. Yeah, that's
All right.
fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know what the next slide is, so but
I
truly flying blind. This is because I know the deck, but I think jumping into kind of the do's, the don'ts, what we want to avoid when we're deploying all of this, this is what
yeah.
we want to jump into. And so I'll kick it over to you guys, and I'll figure out what's going on with my screen.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to take this one, Reed. Don't worry. First and foremost, like I think Reed. Oh, Reed, you and I can do this one. I think
Yeah.
Stephen, you guys blind on this one. Why don't you get us started for the first one? I think that one might be good for you to talk about. I think you mentioned this one before, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the overarching theme we're about to see is having the strategy defined and figuring that out first is really important to make any of these implementations be effective and work right. And we see that across all of our engagements, really, with working with clients. Of you got to get the strategy, think through the plan before just diving in and trying to configure and do the stuff. So a big one you for sure can see is we have all this data. Let's just push everything into HubSpot. HubSpot can build our workflows. We can segment from there. We can build lists. We can have more data is never a problem, right? So
yeah,
I think that's a really common thing that you can lean too heavily into is pushing too much of your data in, and it just becomes noise and bloat at that point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then like the next piece I think what's interesting is that you talk about like bloat. There's also just quality too, and I think skipping the governance aspect of things it's terrible, even especially now with in the AI age. So we want to, when we think about just optimizing prompting and all the kind of best practices around AI, all those things, like they're core. And so within HubSpot, standardizing naming, standardizing data types before you are streaming that data over to your destinations to HubSpot is key. I mean, this is basic stuff, but surprisingly, most companies skip this or they gloss over it, and so creates a lot of technical debt.
Sure. Yeah, and I think in the same line of just kind of starting with the integration, we know we're connecting these two systems together. Let's just build the integration out, start pushing data. Very similar to push everything into HubSpot. You can run into issues with that. You're going to have a lot of rework. And then, again, especially in the AI world, it's quite easy to write code at this point to do. So it's easy to fall into this one. But if you're not mapping what data your team actually needs, and you're just kind of like, I'm going to go get these 10 objects from this system and push them into HubSpot and just start building, you're probably going to have a lot of rework there, and really spending the time of what is the buying journey? What is our customer's journey once they're onboarded into the product? What data do we actually need? Like figuring out all those fundamental pieces should drive your integration strategy, and really just making sure we're figuring out and architecting before building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be brief. I know we only have about 5 minutes left and we wanted to give some time for Q&A, but the next thing is just kind of underestimating identity resolution. And there's a lot of philosophies around identity resolution. Where do we do it? How do we do it? Do we do deterministic? Do probabilistic? And at the end of the day, the goal is that you need to, depending on your use case, different strategies may make sense. So, but ultimately, you want to get to a state where you are getting from an anonymous state to a known state for your customers. So you want to do this up front. You want to understand, like, as Reed, you mentioned, like the buying experience, but there's also an identification flow, right? Like at what point in your different experiences, different technologies, are you collecting identifiers? Are you collecting information that tells you who this person is? And then how do we kind of stitch all that together to like get to that one profile? And that could be anywhere, right? We're agnostic. Segment is agnostic to that. So, but plan that early, I think, is a goal. I mean, that's what we're trying to say here, because trying to retrofit it afterwards, it can be expensive and costly and just a painful experience.
Yep, makes sense. And then, yeah, I think the last big one is treating this just as an IT project. Obviously, your whole business is involved. If you don't have the right stakeholders involved at the forefront of this, so mapping those journeys, figuring out how we're going to get to a getaway, yeah, figure out the identity resolution. All the pieces we've talked about, if we don't have the right stakeholders involved and it's just kind of a technical project, you're going to end up with probably the wrong set of data, probably the wrong journey that we're following. So IT enables this, but you need to make sure you have the right stakeholders involved from all the teams that are going to be actually actioning the data.
Yeah. You're back.
Awesome. I am back. Can you guys hear me? I think we're
yes. Yes, yeah, we're good now.
Hopefully the guys were not cutting my lines out in back, Saptar. So, I was kind of speed through this part because I want to get to some of the questions or the Q&A here. But essentially, if we're zooming out and we're looking at these, some of the what teams get wrong, what you guys just mentioned. And I think a lot of it boils down to making sure that you get, the planning correct and that you're working across the teams, making sure that all of that is organized and properly orchestrated before you jump into actually building and putting everything in place. And I think that's one of the big benefits of working with a partner. And this is for us ourselves, we're Aptitude 8, we're a HubSpot elite partner, and we're the only elite partner that supports both Segment and HubSpot. So we work with a lot of companies that are combining these tools and leveraging them together to both identify the challenges, develop the strategy, the roadmap, and then also deploy and support long term. So happy to have those conversations with you guys. Or whoever may be listening here later on down the line, and if that's something that you're considering. So jumping into the Q&A, want to address some of the questions here, and I believe they're going to pop up on the screen. Perfect. Do I still need a CDP if I already have Snowflake or another data warehouse?
Yeah, happy to take this one. So the question is, like, the landscape is shifting, right? Think of Snowflake as you have this long-term storage, and what Snowflake does is it's built for this massive storage, complex queries, your business intelligence, and we've built Segment to be kind of meet you where you are in your stack. A lot of the challenges that customers come to us with when they have centralized a lot of their data with Snowflake is like, okay, well, how do I get this out? Number one, how do I get it out in a way that's easy for my business users to get it out? And then how do I reconcile all this data that I have in Snowflake as an example, in a way that, like, as I was talking about earlier, like being able to map across the different concepts that I have of data in my warehouse, like accounts, give an e-commerce example, orders, product inventory, right? All these, there's a lot of different business data that sits in the warehouse that adds value to the customer experience, no matter what you're trying to do. That's related to it. So I think really when we think about it, like, yeah, if you have the warehouse, you may not need a traditional CDP implementation. You may need a composable one, and that's the beauty of Segment. It's flexible. We can function if you don't have a warehouse, and if you want to be all warehouse and no real-time instrumentation, we can do the same thing, right? We can build audiences on top of that. We can help you relate users to custom objects, custom data it's in the warehouse. So we have capabilities like linked audiences and reverse ETL to do things like that. And ultimately, all that data at the end of the day needs to get to those business tools like HubSpot. And so, I would say you definitely need, because you have to ask the questions: how are we activating? How are we giving business users the ability to do this in a cross-functional way? Because that same insight needs to go to HubSpot, and it just goes to advertising, it needs to go to support channels, to kind of give that cohesive experience.
Awesome. Next question here, is Segment only viable for companies with a product, or can it work for pure service-based businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it can work for pure services businesses, and I know we're up on time, so I'll keep this one short. But if there's like highly complex, just if there's digital footprint, right, such as like regional websites, distinct client portals, or if there's multi-channel automation, ad campaigns, things like that basically where there's a need for like behavioral data that's involved. And again, if that's data in the warehouse, if it's in other tools, if there's a need to kind of get all that data across the stack, there's definitely a use case here for services. So so pure services businesses, at the end of the day, there's a customer journey that's driven by interactions. And so it's all about capturing those signals of that customer journey, that defining what your like revenue path is. Like, what is that goal? What is that end behavior that's going to lead to revenue? And so backtracking, if there's a journey there, and if steps of that journey can be captured, you can use a segment to do that.
Perfect. Gents, do we want to take one more and then we'll wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, I think I can probably take this one. So I think we see a kind of growth and maturity path a lot of the time where companies are using HubSpot as CRM and kind of their CDP in one. They're connecting a lot of their data into the platform. But I think as companies grow and mature, the number of systems increase, the number of the company's product grows over time. And I think as the data points, the amount of data, the amount of systems, as those grow, there usually becomes a breaking point where you really need to have some sort of centralized layer on top to own a lot of the identity management and governance. And that's really where we see usually a CRM can keep up for a while, but at some point there's a tipping point where you just have too many systems or things involved, and you really need to get to that CDP or similar layer to help define all that stuff and stream out the data that you're looking for into those destination systems.
Perfect. Thanks, Reed. I think we're going to wrap up here. Really appreciate everybody joining us today. Reed, Safdar, thanks for the great conversation and walking us through everything. If you have questions, we will, for those attending, you will get this webinar afterwards. Other than that, appreciate everybody joining. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for the time.
See ya.
Thanks.